friends, it's Michelle here. If you're a huge Lana Del Rey fan like me, you probably listened to her new poetry audiobook, Violet Bent Backwards Over the Grass, this week. So while I was listening to it on repeat in my studio, I wanted to share my process on making this Lana-inspired digital painting on my Procreate app. Lana's poems have a lot of floral imagery, and she also talked about making a cup of coffee for someone. So it reminded me of a reference photo that I'd taken of some flowers that I had bought at Trader Joe's back in late spring. Eddie and I don't have a vase, so we put all of our flowers in a Chemex carafe that we usually use to brew coffee. So it felt like the perfect piece to draw on my tablet while listening to Lana's poems. So using the Procreate app on my iPad, the first thing I do after finding a reference photo is I create a new color palette for myself. And what the color palette allows me to do is it gives me a very intentional set of colors that match in like vibrancy or tone, and it helps me remember as I'm painting what set of colors I should be using, so that way everything kind of goes together. I don't stick to it 100%, like there will be some colors that I just create that I think go as I go along, but this is a good way for me to kind of refer back to what I wanted the original colors to be. So the next step will be to sketch out a composition, meaning like what will the angles of the painting be, how many flowers will there be, and what size will they be in relation to the canvas. So as you can see, I kind of play around with it a little bit, so that way I get a composition that I really like. So next up is blocking out your base colors. So what the base color serves as is a foundation for the other colors to be added on to it later. And what it helps to do, especially when you have a white canvas, is that way you don't have random little spots of like white from the background poking out where it's not supposed to be showing later on. So that's what I'm doing right here, is I'm just kind of lightly coating through a not too bright but not too dark pink shade that is easily blendable later on when I add in more details. And I'm going to do the same thing with a light green for the stems of the flowers as well. Once you've blocked out your base colors, you're going to go in with highlights and shadows to create more depth. So I like to go in with my darker colors first, and then as it gets towards the top of a flower, I'm going to add in some more highlights. If you look at a flower, you're going to notice that the tips or the edges of each petal is going to be a little bit lighter because there's not as many layers of petals protecting it from the light, so it's going to get hit with light a little bit more towards the tips and the tops of each petal. So that's what I'm doing right here. And then for my own stylistic choice, I like to outline a couple of the petals as well, just to make them pop a little bit more. And then with complementary colors, if you notice, I'm also adding in little hints of blue. So there's just tiny hints of like light blue at the tops of each area. And then as I'm going through the stems, I'm also adding in little hints of like a brownish, reddish color, which when you think of a stem and you think of leaves, you don't necessarily think of brown and you don't think of red. But I promise if you add just little pops of that in there, it really does make that sense of realism in your colors. Instead of just keeping your stems green and your flowers pink, add something in there that you wouldn't expect to be there, and it'll actually create more of a realistic look. The same techniques apply when you're also trying to paint glass as well. I can make a separate video on how I do still life with glass specifically, but essentially you're doing the same thing as with the petals and the flowers. You're picking like a light gray color as your base to outline the shape of the glass, and then going in with a brighter highlight, kind of like where the handles are, to show where light is reflecting off of it the most. And after a short break, I am back to just add in all the final key details for the piece. So making sure that all of the stems are sitting within the container of the Chemex and not having any lines that are sitting outside of it. And then also I'm adding in a couple petals that have kind of fallen from the flower down to the ground. This creates a sense of interest towards the front or the bottom foreground area. And it also ties in that pink color that's super saturated at the top of the painting down to the ground. So yeah, here is the finished piece. And if you want to follow me on my Instagram, it's mngoart. It has all of my latest art pieces as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!